All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our public meeting tonight. Looks like we got a few people on, about 8 people on right now, and I'm sure we'll have some more people joining us soon. So this public meeting is on the proposed designation of high-risk erosion areas in Delta County. My name is Jim Ostrowski, and I work in Eagle's Environmental Support Division, and I'll be moderating tonight and just kind of hanging out in the background as our panelists do their thing. So just going to run through a couple logistical details before I hand it over to Kate. First of all lines are muted at this time. If you do have a question for our panelists tonight, you can type your question into the Q&A box on your Zoom toolbar, and we'll be getting to those after the presentation. So feel free to type your questions in. We'll also allow you to raise your hand at that time. So if you'd rather ask your question via your microphone, you can do that. I'll explain how to do that when we get to it. I want to remind you that we're recording this meeting. We record all our public meetings and hearings, and we'll be putting it up on the YouTube channel shortly after. So in a day or so, you'll see it up on our YouTube channel if you're interested in watching again or sharing it with somebody else. I did notice we do have a couple people who are calling in on the phone. So if you're listening in on the phone only, if you hit #2 at the time we ask for questions, that'll show us that your hand is raised and will allow you to unmute yourself on telephone. With that, that's all of my remarks I have. So I'm going to turn it over to Kate and Zach. So Kate, if you want to pop on, and Zach too, you guys want to introduce yourselves, and you guys can take it away.
All right, great. Thank you, Jim. My name is Kate Letterly. I am the Great Lakes Shoreline Specialist for the Water Resources Division, Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. And Zach.
Yeah, hi, I'm Zach Chamberlain. I also work for Water Resources Division in the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, and I am a shorelines analyst, and I work with Kate doing these studies. So I'll be in the background here tonight.
Excellent. Thanks, Zach. Okay, so I am going to share my screen. Okay. And
you can see it.
You can see it. Excellent. Great. Then we'll get going. All right. So the Delta County shoreline was last studied in 1984 and designated in 1985. Tonight, I'll talk about the law, the Delta County study, and the permitting process for building a structure in a high-risk erosion area. That's not moving.
I might have. There.
Sorry, guys.
If you click on the slide itself or hit your space bar, it should work.
I know.
There you go. There's a little delay. You got it.
All righty. We know the shorelines of the Great Lakes are a dynamic and quickly changing environment. Erosion is an ongoing natural shoreline process on the Great Lakes. Fluctuating water levels, storm events, groundwater seeps, surface water runoff, geology, and installation of hardened shorelines and harbor structures all add to erosion. Although well-intended, hardened shorelines do not always make good neighbors and often accelerate erosion on adjacent properties. A hardened shoreline may also block sand moving from the shore into the water. The sand is needed to maintain the beaches along the shoreline. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers tracks water levels on the Great Lakes. Currently, we are well below the historic high water levels of 2020. Water levels are projected to be above the average in the coming months by about ½ a foot. Buildings on the shoreline of Ford River Township were impacted by the recent high water levels. Here we see the installation of sandbags on the shoreline north of Ford River. Sandbags are a temporary solution. The plastic will eventually degrade and the bag will break apart. They are not pretty and often block people walking the shorelines. The impact of erosion on structures was identified as a concern by the Michigan legislature in the 1960s. The high-risk erosion area program was established in 1970 with the passage of Public Act 245, and in 1994 was included in Public Act 451. The intent of the high-risk erosion area program is to prevent structural property loss. The department is directed to study the Great Lakes shorelines, identify hazard areas, document long-term rates of erosion, and establish setbacks to minimize the hazard to structures along rapidly eroding shorelines. The shoreline studies result in alerting property owners to the long-term erosion hazard. The study results help communities and property owners to design and locate developments and homes that are less vulnerable to erosion. It also reduces the need for hardened shorelines by requiring structures be located a safe distance from the edge of active erosion. When a property owner proposes to build a new structure or add on to an existing structure, the high-risk erosion area program provides the setbacks based on the local rate of erosion. Local communities may take over the permitting process by adopting and enforcing a zoning ordinance which meets or exceeds state standards. A high-risk erosion area is where erosion is occurring an annual average of 1 foot per year or greater over a minimum period of 15 years. These areas are considered at risk for structure loss if structures are built too close to the edge of the shoreline. The original studies resulted in high-risk erosion designations in 36 counties between 1980 and 1986. The second round of studies in the same counties began in 1993. We are all still working on finishing the second round of studies. As a result of the studies to date, 29 counties currently have high-risk erosion areas. It's important to remember that erosion is occurring whether or not the shoreline is designated as a high-risk erosion area. The erosion hazard line is the most landward edge of active erosion. This line is often the edge of vegetation, or it may be the top of a bluff. During a study, we identify this line on historic and modern aerial photos. We measure the difference in the location of the erosion hazard line over a long period of time. This allows us to capture the effects of fluctuating conditions such as water levels and storms that contribute to erosion. For the Delta County study, we used historic photos from 1975, 1977, and 1983 compared to modern photos taken in 2021. We felt this allowed us to capture the impacts of the 2020 high water levels. After we determined the erosion hazard line on each photo set, we measured the rate of erosion at 150-foot intervals along the shoreline. We use a program developed by the U.S. Geological Survey called DSAS, or Digital Shoreline Analysis System. This slide shows the erosion hazard line in yellow from a historic photo overlaid on a modern photo where the erosion hazard line is along the edge of the vegetation. The black lines are the transects. The rate of change is calculated for each transect. We group similar rates and calculate the projected recession distances or setbacks for 30 and 60 years as required by the administrative rules. The rules require adding an additional 15 feet for short-term erosion events such as storms. In Delta County, we studied the areas previously designated in 1985, areas identified by local officials, and areas that may be eroding at a rate that may require designation. The study included shorelines in Ford River Township, Gladstone, Wells, Masonville, Ensign, Badenoch, Garden, and Fairbanks townships. Early in the fieldwork, it became clear that much of the shoreline is coastal wetland and would not be designated as a high-risk erosion area in this study. Beginning in Ford River Township, I visited the currently designated areas. I found coastal wetland and sand being deposited on the shoreline from wave action. The beach was building rather than eroding. We propose removing the designations in these areas. North of the Ford River, we identified 2 areas that met the criteria of a high-risk erosion area. Area F, or EM35 North, meets the 1 foot per year threshold. The 30-year setback is 45 feet, and the 60-year setback is 75 feet. Area G, or EM35 South, has a higher rate of recession of 1.4 feet per year. The 30-year setback is 55 feet, and the 60-year setback is 100 feet. Here we see the 2 areas proposed for designation, areas F and G. The blue lines are the transects that meet the rule criteria. When we look at the landscape, we see the sand ridges typical of an open embayment on a Great Lake. Those ridges, formed thousands of years ago, indicate this reach of shoreline has been formed by more energy and change more than other shorelines in the county. This was a previously designated high-risk erosion area in Gladstone near Saunders Point. This wetland shoreline was typical of the 1985 designations in Gladstone. We are proposing to remove all designations. This was a previously designated high-risk erosion area in Wells Township near P Road. We are proposing to remove the designation as it is a coastal wetland. This was a previously designated high-risk erosion area in Masonville Township on Garth Point. This wetland shoreline was typical of the 1985 designations in this township. We are proposing to remove the designations. This was a previously designated high-risk erosion area in Ensign Township near Hunters Point. This wetland shoreline was typical of the 1985 designations in the township. We are proposing to remove the designations. There were no 1985 designations in Beatty Knock Township, and we are not proposing any designations this year. We studied the limestone bluffs along County 513 T Road. The small change does not meet the rule criteria for designation. There were no 1985 designations in Garden Township, and we are not proposing any designations this year. This is a coastal wetland at the Township Park. There were no 1985 designations in Fairbanks Township, and we are not proposing any designations this year. We studied Sand Bay south of Fayette State Park and did not find changes that met the rule criteria for designation. This table summarizes the current status of high-risk erosion areas in Delta County. The table is from the report posted online at michigan.gov/shorelands. Delta County has 221 miles of Lake Michigan shoreline. We narrowed our focus to 10.5 miles. We proposed 2 new high-risk erosion areas and removing the designation from all the high-risk erosion areas designated in 1985. The highest 30-year setback is 55 feet. The lowest is 45 feet from the landward edge of active erosion. The highest 60-year setback is 100 feet. The lowest is 75 feet from the same point on the shoreline. What does designation mean? Designation as a high-risk erosion area means the property owner has more information when it comes to deciding the best location to minimize the potential impacts of erosion for their future home, addition, or new septic system. When a building is not at risk from erosion, the shoreline does not need to be hardened with sandbags or rock. Existing buildings do not have to be moved back, but future additions will need to meet the setbacks. A permit from Eagle is required for new buildings, additions to existing buildings, and septic systems. The Eagle permit is needed before the issuance of a local building permit. Other local, state, and federal permits may be required. Structures that don't need an Eagle permit include open decks, patios or stairs, small sheds, or gazebos that are less than 225 square feet and not on a permanent foundation, unenclosed swimming pools, and routine maintenance of existing structures. The regulations are found in the Great Lakes Shorelands Administrative Rules available at michigan.gov/shorelands. This is the timeline for the designation process. Following the completion of the study, letters were sent to all property owners and local officials explaining the results. Tonight, we are holding this meeting to gather input from local officials and property owners. We work through your comments and concerns and then send out the designation letters by certified mail to all property owners. These letters establish the high-risk erosion areas in Delta County. The new designation of a property may also be contested through an administrative appeal. The written appeal must be submitted within 60 days of the certified mailings and may result in an administrative hearing. Building anywhere on a designated property requires a permit. For example, a permit is required to build or move a house or mobile home, build an addition onto an existing structure, build a garage, construct a detached structure larger than 225 square feet on a permanent foundation, install or replace a septic system. For a house to be built landward of the 30-year setback, it must meet readily movable structure criteria as stated in the administrative rules. Those criteria include limits on the size and type of foundation, the type of construction of the walls above the foundation, the type of exterior siding, number of living units in one building, and access to the building. If the house is ever threatened by erosion, the owners will then be able to move it back on their property. If a house or structure does not meet readily movable structure criteria, such as a house greater than 3,500 square feet, then it has to be located landward of the 60-year setback. Septic systems are not readily movable structures and must always be located landward of the 60-year setback. Sorry guys, I'm stuck again. I wonder if it's lag.
Yeah, it's not moving there, Kate. You
No, not at all.
might have to go out and come back into your PowerPoint there again.
All right. Sorry about that.
Just want to remind everybody while Kate's doing that, that if you do have a question for us tonight, you can type it into the Q&A box on your Zoom toolbar, and we can and we'll get to those in a minute. Also, if you look in the chat in your Zoom toolbar, you will see I put through a couple links up there referencing a couple of the web pages that Kate referenced so far in her presentation. There we go.
Okay. Got it?
It's on the locating new structure slide.
Yeah, that's the same one. I need the next slide. Okay.
Well, if you continue to have trouble, Kate, let me know because I can
Okay.
bring it up on mine too.
Let's see if I'm sharing. Huh. Says I'm sharing. Do you see?
Yep, it's coming up. It says permit process.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yep.
So the program website, michigan.gov/shorelands, has a link to the permit database, MyEnviro, where all applications are submitted. Once a complete application is received, Eagle staff have 60 days to review the file and make a permit decision. Depending on your project, there likely will be other local, state, or federal permits required. In summary, we know erosion is a natural process of living on a Great Lake. Erosion is good for the shoreline as it puts sediment in the system needed to build beaches. Yet erosion is hazardous for structures built too close to the edge of an eroding shoreline. This study of the Delta County shoreline has identified 2 areas eroding at an average annual rate of 1 foot per year or greater. This information is an additional tool for property owners when determining where to place structures on their shoreline property. Building projects will require a permit regardless of where the project is located on the parcel. The report for Delta County is posted at michigan.gov/shorelands. Please provide your comments and questions about the study to Eagle before April 20th, 2023. I'm stuck again. I think that's a good place to end it here. So thank you everybody for listening. My last slide was just another piece about michigan.gov/shorelands and all the information we have on that particular website, which includes maps, rates, setbacks, recession rate studies, information about permitting, and also Eagle staff contact information. So with that, I am going to end and stop sharing.
Yep, I just brought it up, Kate. So I just shared my screen, which has got your
Oh,
last slide on it. So
there we
I
go.
opened it up
Thank you,
for you.
Jim.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right. So it's about 6:25 or so, and we've got some time for some questions. So I'll bring both Kate and Zach back up. You guys want to come back up? And just a reminder, if you had a question, you could type it in the question box, or there's a couple of you on the phone I know. You can also click or hit #2 on your phone, and it'll show me that your hand is raised, and I can call on you that way. So we got a couple really specific questions in here. I'm going to come back to those in a minute. One of them was about, can I get a copy of the presentation? Kate, do you have this presentation posted somewhere, or is it something that?
I do not have it posted, but I can do that. Easily done.
Yeah, we can send it out to everybody if you want afterwards.
Sure. You bet.
I got a person with their hand up, Donald. Donald, I'm gonna let you unmute your line. So if you have a microphone, you can unmute your line. You can ask your question.
Would you please define erosion again?
So erosion is, so what we're looking at is we are looking at the rate of erosion. So how quickly an area is receding. So erosion here, we are looking at the rate of erosion. So the movement of the edge of active erosion, landward edge of that active erosion over time, and how quickly that is happening. And we need to look at a minimum period of 15 years. This particular study, we had 38 years. We looked at from between 1983 and 2021.
But how do you define the word erosion?
So erosion is the removal of sediment due to wave action, wind, people. It could be soil seeps. It could be anything that actually moves that vegetation line further landward.
All right, thanks, Donald. Got another person with a question here. Michael. So Michael, you should be able to unmute your line and ask your question. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you for the presentation and the time you're spending on this. I appreciate it. My question is, our property is just, it's in Ford River, and from what I'm gathering from your presentation, it is not in a high erosion area, but it would remain having a setback of 45 feet. I have to imagine that a lot of these properties that are along that stretch were perhaps grandfathered in prior to 1985, because my cabin is 100 years old, and it probably is too close to the water at this point, only because when we first bought the property, the water was perhaps 200 feet out. It was all dry, area, and all we had were phragmites and everything else out there. And now the water is up perhaps between 40 and 50 feet out the back of the cabin, but we had always been interested in either renovating it or replacing it. And we're just concerned about where we would need to place that structure or move it in the event that we did that on the property.
So we would, so your concern is that you don't have enough room?
We could move it closer towards the highway, towards M35. Yeah, we just didn't know if where the original footprint of the cabin sits now would be permissible as the back portion of the structure.
So if you're, currently it sounds like you're between, you said 50 and 60 feet, is that correct?
I would say probably 40 and 50.
40 and 50. So if you're at 45, so the setback in that area for the 30-year setback is 45 feet. So then you could build a structure that is 3,500 square feet on a basement, pilings, or crawl space. Like I say, 45 feet from the landward edge of active erosion. It sounds to me like that you could do that on that particular property.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that was what I was guessing. It just gets a little confusing with a lot of the language, so.
Yeah, it is. But you're really in an ideal position because you can position your future home in a spot that likely will not be impacted by erosion in the future.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks, Michael. Okay, let's go back to, we got a couple more questions here in our question box. Is there an allowance to deviate from the isolation requirements?
Sounds like that would be a question for your local health department. That's typically a question about your isolation from your well and your septic. And that's something that the health department would answer.
Yeah. So you'd want to contact the health department up there.
Mm-hmm.
Can't remember which the website is, but if you look under Delta County Health Department, it's combined with other counties, but you should be able to find it. We have some properties in Ford River Township listed in flood zones. If I understand it correctly, there's a difference between an erosion area and a flood zone. Is this correct?
Correct. Yes, it is. Flood zones it's about inundation. So the water is going to come in. It's most likely is a relatively flat area. Whereas a high-risk erosion area, it's about erosion, you know, the possibility of land in front of the structure actually eroding away and going into the lake.
Mhm. Hmm. Clarification, I guess. A person's asking 1 foot per year erosion. Does that even occur? Does that ever occur?
Oh, yeah. Oh, very much so. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? If you do, I'll give it a minute. And so we got this question. We were just chatting about this before we got on. We're asking, did your drone ever recover from the eagle attack? Kate, somebody did ask that question.
It did. It did, Paul. Yes, you are right. It did. It was recovered. I don't know if it ever worked again. I don't know if it ever flew, but they definitely recovered it. So it was
Yeah.
in about 4 feet of water.
Yeah, Eagle did not like the Eagle drone.
No, they did not.
And Michael, you got a question again? You can go ahead and unmute your line.
Yeah, it's just clarification. You had mentioned that there may be requirements for federal permits. Is that pretty much confined to, you know, the Hiawatha National Forest area, things like that?
Yeah, I can't think of what in Ford River Township, you know, the local authorities would know best. But as far as building goes, I would think it would just be the local or county officials that would require additional permits. I can't think of what a federal permit would be required in a high-risk erosion area.
The only time I can think of is if you've been doing any work on a beach. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers also has authority over the Great Lakes, so it wouldn't really impact the building and the upland portion. But if you're ever down by the water, you may need to get in touch with the Army Corps.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else got any questions? Well, not seeing any more here, Kate and Zach. So I think we can, I guess, wrap her up. Do you have anything else you want to add as we start to close this up, Kate or Zach?
I just say thank you so much for attending, and I like to answer your questions. Give me a call, or my contact information is in your letters that you received. Please give me a call or an email with any questions you may have.
Yeah, I put Kate's email in the chat too if you didn't grab it, so you can grab it there. And yeah, I just want to remind everybody that we recorded today's session. So if you know somebody, a neighbor, or somebody that didn't get a chance to see it, I'll shoot an email to you guys all with the link to the recording in the next few days. And yeah, you can send it on or watch it later. So thanks, Kate and Zach, for the presentation and answering questions. And thanks to all of you who joined us tonight and spent some time learning about the high risk erosion in your county. So thanks, everybody, and have a great night.